One of the few people of the Old Testament, mentioned as many as 72 times in the New Testament, is the father in faith of all believers and friend of our God, Abraham. This title, bestowed on the first great patriarch of the nation of Israel, is a title that reveals the significance of Abraham's life. Abraham's story begins in the book of Genesis when he's already 75 years old. At a time today when most people are creeping near the end of their lives, Abraham's life was just beginning. The name Abraham means father of a multitude, but he was originally known as Abram, which means exalted father. Now, we don't know much about Abraham's early life, but we do know he and his family were very wealthy as a result of seasonal farming and the herding of large flocks of animals. Abraham was born some 4,000 years ago to his father, Terah, who lived in a famous Babylonian city called Ur of the Chaldeans, an influential city in southern Mesopotamia, located in modern-day Iraq. Terah had 3 sons, Abraham, Nahor, and Haran, who was the father of Lot, whom we'll discuss later. Abraham was a direct descendant of Noah's son, Shem. The Bible explains that after some time, Terah took his entire family out of Ur and headed for the land of Canaan, but stopped at Haran, which was located in what is now southeastern Turkey, and settled there instead. After Terah had died in Haran, God calls to Abraham and says to him, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be blessed to others. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." This was Abraham's first test of faith, and he passes with flying colors. At the age of 75, he uproots his entire family from the land of Haran and journeys into the land of Canaan, apparently finishing the mission that his late father had begun before his death. Although Abraham acts with tremendous faith in response to God's call, we eventually see through the remainder of his life that he still, in some instances, battles with his belief in the promises and revelations that God made to him, and that his faith would eventually be fortified after he had overcome his personal struggles with deceitfulness and impatience. And so after leaving Haran, Abraham arrived in the land of Canaan and camped beside the oak of Moreh with his wife Sarah, who was Sarai at the time, and his nephew Lot. The land that God had promised to him and his descendants was already inhabited by the Canaanites. Perhaps a question in Abraham's heart about how he would eventually own the land that had already been well inhabited is what caused the Lord to appear once more to him and assure him that he would give the land to Abraham and his descendants. And so Abraham built an altar there and dedicated it to the Lord, and then traveled south to another hill country and built another altar there as well, where he prayed and worshipped the Lord. Soon, a severe famine struck Canaan, and Abraham was forced to travel to Egypt in search of food, where he lived temporarily as a foreigner. Sarah, Abraham's wife, was very beautiful, the Bible says. So as he approached the border of Egypt, he acted out of fear and told Sarah to tell the Egyptians that she was his sister, so that they wouldn't kill him, in order to have her for themselves. This was a half-truth because technically Sarah was Abraham's half-sister, but she was also his wife. The Egyptians noticed Sarah's beauty, as Abraham had suspected, and took her into Pharaoh's palace. Abraham received many gifts because of her. Pharaoh did not find out the truth about Abraham's wife until the Lord sent terrible plagues upon him and his household because of Sarah. Pharaoh summoned Abraham and accused him sharply, asking why he never mentioned that Sarah was his wife. He then ordered his men to escort Abraham and his wife and all his possessions out of the country. This event showcases that Abraham, though obedient to the Lord at the time, had lost faith in God's protection over his life, even after all the promises that God had made to him. In lying, Abraham had only multiplied his hardship. So after being sent away, Abraham, Lot, and all his family returned to where they had first built an altar to the Lord, and pitched their tents between Bethel and Ai, where they had camped before. Both Abraham and Lot had acquired so much cattle that the land was no longer sufficient to accommodate them both. So conflict ensued amongst the herdsmen. To settle this, Abraham generously offered to give Lot any area of Canaan he chose to inhabit. He said to him, "If you want the land to the left, then I'll take the right. And if you prefer the land on the right, then I'll go to the left." Lot took a good look at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley, which the Bible describes as being well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord or the beautiful land of Egypt. Then he decided to take the land for himself and settled among the cities of the plain near Sodom. But as we soon find out, the people in the area were very wicked and constantly sinned against God. In making this decision to give Lot a share of the land, Abraham acts with true faith and displays understanding of true ownership of the land by giving what he knows already belongs to him. Further proving the point, God then says to Abraham, "Go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you." And for the first time, God now adds a detail that surely surprised the childless Abraham. He promised him descendants that, like the dust of the earth, cannot be counted. So with Lot on his way towards the Jordan Valley, Abraham moved his camp to Hebron and settled there, near the oak grove belonging to Mamre, where he built an altar to the Lord. Sometime later, chaos ensues for Lot and his family as four powerful kings from the east join forces to attack and plunder Sodom. And since Lot lived in the city, he was captured and everything he owned was taken. Luckily, one of Lot's men escaped and reported everything to Abraham in the oak grove. Abraham, now acting for the first time as a military hero, mobilizes 318 trained men in pursuit of the kings and caught up with them in Dan. Attacking overnight, he chased the king's men as far as Damascus and ended up recovering Lot along with all his possessions and all the women and other captives. Upon Abraham's return from his victory, the king of Sodom, as well as Melchizedek, who was the king of Salem and priest of God Most High, brought Abraham some bread and wine. Melchizedek then blesses Abraham, and then Abraham gave him a tenth of all the goods he recovered. Abraham is seen here as a very courageous man who took on the threat of a large army for the sake of rescuing his family. His godly courage earned him victory over his enemies and honor amongst his allies. Time passed and God appeared to Abraham once more in a vision. As God spoke, making more promises to Abraham, he interrupted with a question that had been burning in his heart. He said to God, "O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son?" Abraham feared and respected God, but he did not shy away from asking God questions, as we'll see again in the future. Abraham's actions are revealing of God's patient character as he works his will through human beings. At Abraham's question, God responds with the promise to give Abraham a son who will be his heir. The Lord took Abraham outside and said to him, "Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have." And Abraham believed God, and God counted him as righteous because of his faith. Abraham's example of sola fide, faith alone, is foundational in Christianity and teaches us that his faith in God's promises was sufficient for God to declare him righteous in his sight. This principle will be further explained by the Apostle Paul thousands of years later in his letter to the Romans and the Galatians. After God's promise to provide Abraham with a son, Abraham falls into a deep sleep where God reveals to him that his descendants will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years in a foreign land and will eventually be freed. But he reassures Abraham that he won't be part of this suffering, but will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. In the same setting, God specified the amount of land that will be given to Abraham, which extended from the border of Egypt to the great Euphrates River. 10 years after Abraham had settled in the land of Canaan, Sarah decided that because she was still unable to give Abraham a son, she would give her female servant Hagar to Abraham as a wife so that she could have children through her. In what is seen as an act of impatience, Abraham conceded. The result of this arrangement was the birth of Abraham's first son at the age of 86, whom an angel of the Lord instructed Hagar to name Ishmael, meaning God hears. Fast forward into the future, and Abraham is now 99 years old, making Ishmael 13. God appeared to Abraham and recited the same promise of descendants to him. During this encounter, God added a few details. He told Abraham that his name will no longer be Abram, but it will now be Abraham, because he will be the father of many nations. God added that even kings will be amongst his descendants. He told Abraham that in order to keep the covenant, each male in his household would have to be circumcised on the 8th day after birth. He also told Abraham that Sarah's name will no longer be Sarai, but Sarah, and that she will be blessed with a son this time the following year. Abraham bowed down to the ground, but laughed to himself in disbelief, thinking, "How could I become a father at the age of 100, and Sarah a mother at the age of 90? Nevertheless, he assumes it must be Ishmael that God is referring to, but God refuses, stating explicitly that Sarah will give birth to a son, and he will be called Isaac, through whom God's covenant promise will be realized. After God left Abraham, he circumcised his entire household on that same day. What initially seemed to be a sign of disbelief in the promise God had made Abraham followed with another extraordinary sign of faith on the part of Abraham, with him performing this irreversible ceremony on his entire household. Near the oak grove belonging to Mamre, the Lord appeared to Abraham once more. This time, God appeared as three men who suddenly were standing nearby Abraham. In hospitable tradition, Abraham welcomes the men into his home and prepares them a feast. Soon after, the visitors reiterate to Abraham of the coming birth of their son. This time, Sarah laughs in disbelief, at which the Lord replies, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Out of fear, Sarah denies her laughter, but the Lord isn't convinced. Soon after, the men stood up to head to Sodom, and Abraham accompanied them to send them on their way. Then the Lord shares with Abraham his plans for Sodom and Gomorrah, but before he decides to share, the Bible reveals an internal dialogue that God has about Abraham, in which he decides that Abraham is worthy enough and important enough to know the mind and intentions of God Almighty. A touching scene that further emphasizes the special relationship God had with Abraham. After learning God's intentions about the cities, Abraham, in daring fashion, steps into his role as the father of all nations to intercede for the sinfulness of foreigners. He also uses this opportunity to learn more about the character of God. He was aware of God's righteousness and justice, meaning he had to punish the sinful cities, but he was also aware of God's mercy. Attempting to see how far his mercy could extend without calling down God's wrath on himself, Abraham eventually asked God if even 10 righteous people living in the city would be enough to spare the city from God's wrath. Even though not even 10 righteous could be found, God's mercy is still manifest in him saving Lot and his family from the destruction. Abraham teaches us so much from this conversation he has with our God. He teaches us that the possibility exists for sinners to be saved from destruction by the mere existence of even a small number of God-fearing people amongst them. Sometime later, Abraham moved south to the Negev, where he lived for a while between Kadesh and Shur, and then moved to Gerar. Here, Abraham falls into deceit once more and introduces his wife Sarah as his sister to King Abimelech of Gerar. The king then asks for Sarah to be brought to his palace. Soon after, God appears to the king in a terrifying dream and tells him he's a dead man, for the woman he's taken is another man's wife. The next morning, Abimelech summons Abraham and questions him, and again, he delivers the same reason why he did it before in Egypt. He was afraid he would be killed because of his wife. Abimelech then returned Sarah and gave Abraham 1,000 pieces of silver and the choice to settle nearby wherever he chose. Abraham then prayed for the king and his household. The curse of infertility of his household was lifted. King Abimelech and Abraham became firm allies with an oath that was sworn at the site of the well named Beersheba. At the same time, a year later, after Abraham was promised a child, his second son was born, and the old couple was full of joy. And they named him Isaac, and he was circumcised 8 days later, as God had commanded. After Isaac had grown up and was about to be weaned, Sarah caught sight of Ishmael making fun of Isaac. Driven with anger, she asked Abraham to get rid of Hagar and her son. Abraham, however, was distressed and reluctant to follow through. But God told him to do as Sarah instructed, since Isaac would be the one who would receive God's promise. God also reassured Abraham that Ishmael will also have many descendants, since he was also Abraham's blood son. The next morning, Abraham prepared food and a container of water and strapped them to Hagar's shoulders and sent them on their way. And they wandered aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba. Abraham and Sarah did not wait for the Lord to fulfill his promise, and therefore Abraham had to suffer the pain of sending his firstborn son away from his household. But this suffering would pale in comparison to the turmoil Abraham was soon to face, having Isaac as his only heir. One day, God called out to Abraham and asked him to take his son, his only son, whom he had waited so long to finally receive, the son who had been born of a miracle and had brought joy to the old couple. God asked him to take Isaac, whom Abraham loved so much, and sacrifice him as a burnt offering in the land of Moriah. In one of the most powerful and magnificent displays of faith for which Abraham is known, he wakes up early the next morning to do as the Lord had instructed him. He chops wood for the fire, saddles his donkey, and takes 2 of his servants along with Isaac, and they journeyed for 3 days to their destination. With the place of the offering in Abraham's sight, he leaves the 2 men behind and travels the remaining distance with Isaac. During the walk, which must have felt like an eternity for Abraham, Isaac asks innocently where the sheep was for the burnt offering, to which Abraham famously and painfully replies, "God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son." After arriving the place God told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. He tied up his son Isaac and laid him in the altar on top of the wood. Just as Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son, an angel suddenly called from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, don't lay your hand on the boy. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son." And Abraham looked up to see a ram caught up by its horns in a thicket, which he used as the sacrifice instead of his son. And then Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. And because of Abraham's acts, the Lord reaffirms his promise to him in momentous fashion for the final time, and ends by saying to Abraham that through your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed, all because you have obeyed me. And there Abraham is crowned with the blessing of blessings. And this act of obedience and complete faithfulness to God sets an example that all Christians would strive to follow for generations to come. Years later, Sarah died in Hebron, in the land of Canaan, at the age of 127 years. Abraham purchased what would be a permanent burial cave for his family there in Machpelah for 400 pieces of silver, along with the land and its surrounding trees. Then he buried Sarah in the cave near Mamre. In Abraham's old age, he turned towards finding a wife for his son Isaac. He turned to his oldest servant, who was in charge of his household, to aid him in this task. He made him swear that he would not allow Isaac's wife come from among the Canaanites. Instead, Abraham wanted Isaac's wife to come from amongst his people back in Haran, where they had journeyed from. In doing so, he was protecting Isaac from the dangers of mixing himself with their surrounding pagan practices, and Isaac was to never return to Haran, presumably out of fear that he would remain there. So the servant journeyed to the town where Abraham's own brother Nahor had settled, and there he chose the virgin Rebekah, Nahor's granddaughter, as a wife for Isaac. After succeeding in finding a wife for Isaac, Abraham married another woman named Keturah, and she bore him sons. He gave everything he owned to Isaac, and then gave gifts to the sons of Keturah, and sent them off to a land in the east, away from Isaac, so as to remove any threat to Isaac's inheritance. As God had promised, Abraham lived to a ripe old age of 175 years, and then he died, having lived a long and satisfying life. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him beside Sarah in the family burial cave. The promise God made to Abraham was repeated to Isaac, and again to his son Jacob, and the results of this promise trickled down through generations. Abraham's life, more than any other, served as proof to the Apostle Paul that faith alone is more important to salvation than Mosaic law. Abraham believed God and was considered righteous in the eyes of God before he was commanded to undergo the ritual of circumcision. According to Paul, the coming of Jesus Christ gives people the opportunity to receive salvation by displaying the same faith as Abraham. Abraham was selected as God's chosen because of his faith, and this same selection should be seen as being extended from Abraham to all those who have faith in God, making all those who have faith God's chosen. Abraham therefore is granted the title of being the father of all those who have faith in God, and not only the father of the nation of Israel. Adding to this teaching, the Apostle James concludes that Abraham's faith was only justified because of his works in him offering his son Isaac on the altar. And therefore, he famously concludes that faith without works is dead.